Welcome to a new Scary Tuesday, TikTakers. This time, we go back to creepypastas with a new story. Dr. Smiley, a character created by BunsDream and whose story we have adapted for you. My name is Dr. Smiley, but don't get it mixed up. I'm not an ordinary doctor. Unlike my fellow professionals who do their best to cheat death, I cannot relegate myself to something so vulgar. In return, I receive it with a warm hug and help my patients do the same. I like to select them carefully. I follow them and study their behavior before taking the step. I had been following a fascinating young woman with an empty gaze for some time. I was sure she would be an exemplary patient. It was her deep, dark bags under her eyes and her expression of exhaustion that greeted me when I met her in an alley on the way home. I only needed to stand in front of her and smile. I grabbed her hand and kissed it. "I will help you," I said. I saw a flash of hope appear in her empty gaze, and I knew immediately that she would follow me. She did. We walked hand in hand to my office, located in an old block of buildings on the outskirts. Nobody would say that there was a health clinic there. But for me, it was my workplace and a second home. Here, I helped my patients, tired of their own existence, to accept death. We went up in silence to the 5th floor, the last one. I opened the door and invited her in with the same smile as before. We went inside and then I closed the door behind us. There's nothing like home. I invited her to sit on the big sofa in the living room while I went to the kitchen for 2 glasses of water. I needed to enjoy that moment alone. You didn't need to be in front of her to perceive her nervousness and hear her heart race. After filling the 2nd glass, I calmly returned to the living room. I found her sitting down. She was finally showing some kind of expression on her face. "What's the matter, dear?" I asked her as I offered her one of the glasses and sat across from her. The young woman turned pale and pointed behind me. I didn't need to look back to know what she was pointing at. That? Don't worry, there are remains of an emergency operation. Sometimes things get complicated. Her eyes looked at me curiously for a moment, but soon they dimmed as before. I was both amazed and fascinated by how little life they had. But enough talking. I got up and took her hand again, leading her this time to my operation room, slightly lit by an emergency light. Even though she could barely see, I knew every inch of the room. So showing off my best manners, I guided her to the stretcher in the center of the room. She got on it automatically. At that moment, I went back to the entrance and turned on the light. I waited for her reaction. "What is that?" she said in horror as she pointed to one of the shelves full of jars. "That, my dear, are samples of my patients. The last one resisted a lot while I was catting her. Later, I discovered that she had a strange disease that made her blood cells die, so her body had turned off." I saw terror on her face. The young woman sat up straight on the stretcher and tried to escape, but she had given me time to get my syringe ready. One should always be prepared at work. I grabbed her tight and stabbed her in the neck, injecting the drug. "Shh, don't be afraid. I'm here to help you," I whispered in her ear. The girl wanted to scream, but her body had already fallen asleep. Submerged in a deep sleep, I settled her again on the stretcher. I was finally able to prepare for surgery. I was impatient, but I had to do things right. First, I tied her hands and feet. Patient safety always comes first. Then, I took the case with the medical instruments out of the closet. I put them on the surgical trolley and placed it next to the stretcher. As I put on my gloves and mask, I heard her complain. I turned around with a kind smile on my face. "Welcome back, sleepyhead," I said as I selected the scalpel. The young woman gradually regained consciousness and began to writhe more and more as my smile faded. That disgusted me. Couldn't she see that I was trying to help her face death? Was no one going to thank me for my work or my kindness? Nah, of course not. I raised the scalpel angrily and stabbed her violently in the stomach. I started rummaging inside her as she writhed and squealed in pain. I like to keep the patient alive while I examine them. It's much more fun to see how the organs continue to function even when exposed. And I always try to make them feel comfortable, but I didn't feel like treating her well after so much disdain from her. After opening her stomach and kidney, she finally stopped moving, and I got bored. I cut a small piece from her insides and dropped it into a jar. A new sample for my collection, I thought with a smile. I looked at her face. Her eyes were wide open and blood draped from her mouth. I stifled a giggle. The face they put on at the end is always very funny. I sighed and proceeded to remove my gloves while thinking, another successful operation. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode.